So you've got that PowerPoint deck, and now we need to get a facilitator guide going from that. One of the main things you really need to consider is how do we take the speaker notes section in PowerPoint and convert it into actions that our facilitator can do. So what is a facilitator action? Think of these as the says, the do's, the asks, all the specific items that facilitator is going to be accomplishing throughout the training process. Currently, you probably have gone into the speaker notes section and have like a bold say or a bold do to break up the notes section. We're going to dive into how to handle that in a few moments. But there's so many more things. If you've taken the time to start building out your style guide, which was yesterday's assignment, and if you haven't done so or don't have access to that document, in the description below, I'll give you a link where you can download the style guide. But in there is a list. It's probably around 50 or so actions that LeaderGuide Pro will break out without you customizing it. Will allow you to break out your notes into different actions. Another item to think about with facilitator actions is who is the final audience that this action is for. You're like, Pat, what are you talking about? We're doing facilitator actions. These should be for the facilitator. Well, yes and no, right? So the facilitator is just one portion of what's happening or who is in attendance of that training, right? Be it classroom or virtual, you also have attendees or participants. So think about breaking up your actions into the final audience. Is it going to be something that's just for the facilitator? Is it just for the participant? Or is it going to be an action that would actually involve both of them? So let me give you an example. If I ever need the facilitator to say something, but I don't need it to, at the end of the day, be in the participant book, to me, that's a say action, right? Say this, say something like, say this exactly, right? Something along those lines. But if it's an item that I also need to be, I want the facilitator to say, but I also need it to be in the participant book, to me, that's a key point. The facilitator is still going to be saying these items, but now because it's a key point, when I go and I build up my participant book, I know I'm bringing over my key points, but I'm not bringing over my say actions, right? So I can also word that material the way I write it in the voice of the final audience so that it works not only for the facilitator, but also for the participant. And now I'm saving time when I go from a facilitator guide to a participant. There are 3 to 4 audiences that your facilitator actions can be written towards. So the 3 definitive: facilitator only, participant only, facilitator and participant. You may also have a 4th audience that may work its way into some of those other ones, but that 4th audience is the producer. So depending on how you do it, you may have, a separate producer outside of your facilitator. So you may be putting actions out separately for that. When you're thinking about your facilitator actions, I basically break it down that a well-crafted or a well-constructed facilitator action is complete and concise, so that we've got all the information that we need at our fingertips as a facilitator to deliver it successfully this time, next time, if I'm doing it, if you're doing it, if it's happening in Boston, if it's happening in Honolulu, right? Everything's in our book. So we've got the complete information and it's concise, which really brings us to our second point, is that we want it to be easy to access or at a glance, right? We don't want our facilitators looking down, spending all their time reading out of the book, right? Eye contact helps drive engagement, which will hopefully then drive effectiveness. But if you have someone just reading out of the book or turning around and reading that slide deck to somebody, it's less than successful as a training experience, learning experience. Remember, we want to have our facilitators' eyes up to the class or up to the camera as much as possible. How does LeaderGuide Pro help us take the speaker notes section from PowerPoint and break it out into complete and concise, easy to access, at a glance facilitator actions. Well, let's take a look. If you think about facilitating from a PowerPoint deck, whether you're looking at the slide regularly or in presenter view, all we have is the speaker notes section, right? That the bottom place where all your notes are. And so think about it. It's called speaker notes. It's talking to one audience, in this case, probably the facilitator. We can break that up by putting in, participant information, like, you typing in material. But at the end of the day, the speaker notes section truly is speaking to one audience. So how does it work in LeaderGuide Pro? After you import in your slides and notes into LeaderGuide Pro, we break up every action into what we call content blocks, right? We have a slide content block. We have, in this case, a PowerPoint notes content block. But remember, we're trying to drive facilitator actions completely and concisely, easy at a glance. PowerPoint notes doesn't speak to any action. It's just like, hey, here's what was in the PowerPoint notes. So we want to break these out into facilitator actions. On the LeaderGuide Pro ribbon, in the content block section, right? Content blocks is our term for facilitator actions. We've broken them down into instructor-led. We also have virtual instructor-led. And then when we get more advanced, there's a way you can create your own bundles, and it'll drop in a whole bunch of actions all at once with one single click. And that's what these content block bundles are. The way we insert in content blocks into LeaderGuide Pro is based off where your cursor is located. So if I put my cursor, I'm going to have it over here in the third column next to slide 2. But I'll go up to the content block section, and just for these purposes, let's drop down instructor-led, and I can choose, and I'm going to just choose the first one on the list, activity. So when I select that, it will go through and it inserts in the content block with a visual cue, a headline, a prompting field for the notes that you want to have if you were crafting your own at that moment. And then in this case, because we're in a 3-column, I've got a third column set up for any additional information I may need to put in there. So let's look at how do we handle the notes section from PowerPoint that's come in, right? So we've got all the notes that were in our PowerPoint, and this was good, but I now want to break it out into deliverable actions for my facilitator. I can now come in and just highlight the piece. So let's say this first line is something I need the facilitator to say. I can highlight it, come down. Let's say I will choose the say block. And it has now brought that information as, copied it over into the say content block that I'm able to start working from. Now notice we don't actually delete it out of the initial doc or the initial note section because maybe we chose the wrong block or you need to use it somewhere else. But eventually, at the end, I will go through and clean all of this up. But now I can just start working through my notes, right? Maybe this second piece, this was a key point. This is something I want to make sure is going to be available to go for, both my facilitator guide and my participant guide. I'm going to put this as a key point. So again, I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to choose key point. It will then go in, insert that in. And now I can just continue working my way through the different pieces. And so let's just say this was an activity, and I'm able to start quickly breaking this all down. Now notice on my notes, I had a piece that saying this was going to take 3 minutes, right? Which in reality is probably meaning 3 minutes while this slide is showing. We're going to be doing everything that's underneath that. The way I can handle this is if I come over here to our IQs task pane, in the content block where I want to put that time marker, I would just put my cursor. In this case, again, I dropped it into column 3. I'm going to come over. I'm going to type in the number 3 for the minutes, click on the clock icon, and now you'll see underneath the visual cue, I've gotten a time marker of 3 minutes. So I now actually have everything that I need. I've broken that notes section out. And again, PowerPoint notes doesn't speak to any specific actions. So I'm now just going to actually delete out this content block. So on the ribbon in the text and table formatting section, I'm going to come up bottom row, far right-hand choice, choose delete table row, and it will take that out. And now maybe I need to rearrange how those notes came in. Simple enough. Put your cursor in the line that you want to move, and I can, select which content blocks are moving up and down, and I can, rearrange this the way I need it. Now, in some cases, maybe I want to point something out, right? So what I can do, and this is where the third column is very handy, I can come over back to my IQs pane, put a note column, and then add in whatever that little note would be. In that case, it wasn't a lot. That was a fairly large one. So let's just... But in other cases, maybe I don't have anything that's going to be going into that third column. Right, so I can, in this case, come back to text and table formatting, choose bottom row, second choice from the right, which is our merge or split. And that will read the template within the collection of how wide column 1 and how wide column 2 is, and column 3, and it will merge those and give those the correct shape. Or if you were in a 3 column, or I'm sorry, in a 2 column and you click on it, it would bring it back to a 3 column, but keeping all your lines correctly set up the way you want it. So again, I can quickly go through this and start getting this set up exactly the way I want, right? And maybe during this, we're also going to be doing, there was a poll that's going to be going during this. So I could go through and give all these instructions. And if we were to now look, I've got my facilitator instructions set up, at a glance, easily formatted, easy to use. And so my facilitators can quickly look, see what's going on, and then get back to actions versus going in and trying to do all of that just from this note section. As you can see, very easy to break your notes out into those different actions, to manipulate them up and down and get them into the locations that you need as you're working through those notes. To go just a little bit deeper into this, and I will put into the description of a link to the full article of this. When you're breaking out your notes into deliverable actions, right, into those facilitator actions, there's 3, sometimes 4 components of a well-constructed, what we call a content block or a facilitator action. One is always that visual cue, right? We're driving actions with an icon. So at a glance, we've seen a specific icon that's been used consistently, and we know what we're going to be doing just off that action, just off that icon. All right. Now tie to that a headline, right? So let's say we've got a speaker bubble, right? The cartoon bubble that we're going to be saying something. Well, now we've got a headline after that of say something like, right? So with a headline of say something like, I know whatever is underneath that headline, I can get across, in my own words. I don't have to say it verbatim, right? It is a general idea. It doesn't need to be, read word for word. Where if a headline of say exactly, and then we've got the text underneath there, now I know I've got to go and deliver exactly how it said. Maybe it's a legal or compliance notice, something like the Miranda rights. You've got to get it word for word. That headline still tied to the visual icon, is going to help us drive our actions, and our facilitator knows exactly what to do and how to do it. Third piece of a great facilitator action or content block, complete and concise information. Right? We've talked about this before. We want our facilitator guide to be the be-all, one ruling document that has everything that we need, so that if our facilitator's out sick, our everyday facilitator's out sick, or they've got promoted, or they left the company, the next person up knows exactly what to do. So complete and concise information is the third piece. The fourth piece sometimes comes up, sometimes doesn't, is going to be facilitator or producer specific actions, right? Like maybe as we are asking a question, the producer is going to be launching a poll. So it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes you need it, right? So those are the four pieces. I'll put down in the description below a link to an article going through this with examples. So this item is going to be a lot more in depth. So we've come to the end. Well, if you're participating in PowerPoint Week with LeaderGuide Pro, you still have your homework assignment. Granted, we're not checking it, but if you're doing it, if you're participating, you should do it. So for homework, first item, go back through the style guide that was assigned yesterday. And in the section for formatting and content structure, there is the list of all the different, what we call content blocks, or think of them as facilitator actions, and start reviewing those, right? They're broken down into instructor-led and to virtual instructor-led. But take a look at those and figure out which ones in here are already in use or already referenced per se in your PowerPoint notes, so in that speaker notes section, or which ones are going to help further support that training and make it more effective, because we want to start adding those into our training. Now, if you're in PowerPoint, you can start going through and adding in, let's say bolded headlines of those actions, right? Think of like putting in the say or the do or activity or breakout or role play, right? Above that portion of the notes. So if you read from top to bottom through the speaker notes section, it was basically, as they work through that slide, and here's everything that's happening while that slide's being shown in the background. Third piece, if you have LeaderGuide Pro or using the LeaderGuide Pro free trial, start inserting in those content blocks after you've brought in your slides, right? Import your slides and notes and start breaking those notes like we saw on the video by highlighting the text and inserting in those content blocks. But other than that, I will see you guys all tomorrow. All right, take care, folks.